Hello, and welcome to our channel, The Watchful Warrior. I am the Watchful Wife, and today I'd like to take you on another journey to a seaside retreat on the island of Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard is approximately 26 miles long by 9 miles wide, and the island is located in the state of Massachusetts, south of the Cape Cod region. For me, arriving on the ferry from the mainland is always one that is filled with anticipation because I love just getting off onto the island and feeling like I'm totally stepped back into time. Just all of the beautiful Victorian era houses and the wind chimes and the smell of the salt air. It's just really magical and beautiful. The island was supposedly discovered by Bartholomew Gosnold in 1602. He was British and was instrumental in the founding of the Virginia Company, which had ties to Jamestown, and this man supposedly died in Jamestown. He had explored off the coast of New England and was known for discovering Cape Elizabeth in Maine, along with Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard. Supposedly, the legend goes that he named Martha's Vineyard after his infant daughter who had died, and also for the abundance of grapes that were found here. So this is a picture of the ferry as it currently looks today coming into the harbor. And when I was digging around online, I found this picture of this train that would pick up the tourists from the ferry in Oak Bluffs, which is on the northern end of the island, and bring them to Katama, to the beach there, which was on the southern end of the island. And interestingly, this train was first working in 1874 and only ran for 22 years. Here is a ferry coming into the dock a little bit later time period than the photo that you just saw. The ferry's name is Unkatina, named after an island off on the Elizabeth Islands. It's also a side-wheeler steamboat, and I started thinking that the steamboats might be part of the grand transportation that we've seen with some of the old world. And here in this picture you can see that the railroad is no longer existing. The Seaview Hotel is located right near the wharf, as you can see in the background. And this is a beautiful hotel with a lovely tower, and you can see how close it is to the beach. And it was built by 1874, and then alongside of it, kind of in the background, you can see something called the Seaview House, which also housed rooms where people could stay. The Seaview Hotel had a skating rink as well. The Seaview Hotel no longer looks like this. It looks completely different. It has turned into condo units, and this beautiful grandeur of days long ago no longer exists. The Seaview House was built in 1874, but by 1892 had succumbed to a mysterious fire, and this definitely has elements of the old world to me. In it, you can see some brick towards the bottom there by the dock, along with the pinnacles and the copper finial at the top of the spire there. And this is something that I literally just came across and I find extremely fascinating. But what this is called the Pavilion, otherwise known as a summertime refreshment stand, and was designed by Samuel Freeman Pratt of Boston, along with the Seaview Hotel, and it actually was next to the Seaview Hotel. And he built this in the 1870s to resemble a Chinese pagoda. And the pavilion no longer exists. It was also destroyed, I believe, by a fire, along with the Seaview House. It's octagonal in shape, so it has 8 sides. And what I also find very interesting is that these pictures seem to resemble some kind of excavation. I don't know what all these mounds of dirt are, but that's what I'm guessing. That it's not really sand, even though it's by the beach. You can see Ocean Park as you head into the Oak Bluffs Wharf on the ferry, and this is a beautiful park. It's lined with Victorian homes in the background, and the bandstand is actually, as we know, is actually an old world relic. So in the next picture I have an older version of the bandstand that you can see. And while we're on the subject of pagodas and pavilions and octagon-shaped things, this is another beautiful building. This is called Union Chapel. It looks very different today. It does not have a lot of these beautiful features that you can see, but it is an octagon shape. It's now used as a chapel. I just find this very fascinating. So this is more what Union Chapel looks like today. It's missing that entire top pinnacle. Supposedly it was built in 1870. The Flying Horses sits adjacent to Ocean Park and is considered the nation's oldest platform carousel. The building to the left there is called the Tivoli. It was supposedly built in 1907 and demolished in 1964. During that time period, it was considered the largest dance floor on the Atlantic coast, and interestingly enough, nobody can remember what was in its location prior to 1907. The Flying Horses Carousel really feels like you're stepping back into time when you're there. It was built in 1876 by a man named Charles Dare. It's one of the 2 Dare carousels that still exist. The other one is located in Rhode Island. And this particular one was relocated from Coney Island in 1884. The horses are made of carved wood with real horsehair and glass eyes. The artwork that you can see along the inner part of the carousel was rediscovered in the 1970s and thought to be original to the carousel. It has pictures of New England seaside and rural landscapes. East Chop Lighthouse is one of the 5 lighthouses of the Vineyard. It sits high on a bluff overlooking Vineyard Haven Harbor, and this is what it currently looks like today. This postcard I found was taken in 1912. And interestingly enough, the lighthouse looks very different. It actually shows the brick that I believe is reminiscent from the Tartarians. And then I was very puzzled by the left-hand side, the pyramid structure, which I was wondering if that was some kind of device to capture the ether. Interestingly, if you look at pictures older than 1916, this pyramid is gone. Bathhouses were plentiful back in the 1800s on the Vineyard, and especially in Oak Bluffs alone. I read an article that there were actually hundreds, which surprised me. And this one did appear to have the brick as well as a chimney that seemed reminiscent of some of the architecture I've seen in the Tartarian world. Oak Bluffs is home to the Martha's Vineyard Camp Meeting Association, which consists of many gingerbread cottages, which were a result of the religious revival back in the 1800s, where people would come to the island and set up tents, which eventually, as the story goes, became cottages. And this is the Tabernacle, which is the center of the Campground Meeting Association, and it's made of wrought iron and a cupola. Every year in late August, the campground celebrates the Grand Illumination, which is the end of the summer season, and the campground owners will hang Japanese lanterns on their porches, and also they're found on the Tabernacle too. The Tabernacle was built in 1870, and prior to that was supposedly a large canvas tent. But looking at this picture really screams old world to me. The dome, the cupola, could have been a gold material at one point in time. Otherwise, the material is iron. And then the pinnacles and the finials that you can see in the tabernacle and the church to the right-hand side. In the book called City in the Woods by Ellen Weiss, she states, entering the 34-acre precinct of Wesleyan Grove is not very different today than it was in the 19th century. People now, as then, are surprised to find themselves in a world which is so unlike any of their previous experience that it seems they have stumbled upon the dwellings of an unknown people, an archaeological mystery whose only evidence is the lost society's strange built remains. And I do think that this is part of a lost society. The architecture is just very quaint. It's called Carpenter's Gothic. Most of these cottages were built in the mid-1860s. But to me, it just doesn't make any sense. I'm just thinking about what the country was going through during that time with the reconstruction of the Civil War. And yet they spend all this time building intricate cottages for pleasure. And thinking about what we just discussed with the railroad and the steamship and the large hotel and all of these cottages, and that everything was brought to the island in the mid-1800s during the Civil War time and post-Civil War, using all of these materials. It just seems very frivolous, and I often think that this religious revival is really a cover-up for all of these cottages to exist. And just a little bit more about the Carpenter Gothic style. So this actually was popular in 1840 to 1870 and grew out of a need to quickly build houses in fancy detail, which I find kind of a strange phenomenon. In the United States, there was also an abundance of fine lumber, which I also find kind of strange story. The architects used steeply pitched roofs, gables, gingerbread, fancy scrollwork, carved porch rails, and windows that mimicked Gothic cathedrals. And so when I read that, I thought that's actually pretty accurate. I would say that these buildings do mimic Gothic cathedrals because, you know, they're part of the whole energy grid, I would think, to capture the ether and to use the free energy that existed. The trolley line ran throughout the campground from 1870 to 1917, as you can see here, and initially the trolleys started as horse-drawn. And in this picture, I find really fascinating the house in the background with a tower. It's also very reminiscent to me of a lot of the Tartarian structures that I see today. I feel like it's important to note that Oak Bluffs is not the only home to the religious revival camp meeting, that there's a lot of others within the United States. Ocean City, New Jersey has incredible pictures, and there's others in New England, including Asbury Grove in Hamilton, Massachusetts, and Alton Bay, New Hampshire, and Empire Grove in East Poland, Maine. So I don't know. I wonder if this really is part of the Tartarian story as well. In 1874, President Grant came to the island and stayed at one of the cottages in the campground. He is not alone. Many other presidents have also come here, including John Adams, Chester Arthur, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama, among others. This picture here shows Circuit Avenue, which is the main street in downtown Oak Bluffs. And currently today it is lined with buildings on both sides of the street that house shops and restaurants. And I feel like some of these buildings, I don't know, I'm just seeing like the spires kind of towards the back, and I don't think all of these buildings are still in existence today. Eggertown Lighthouse is one of the other 5 lighthouses that is located on the vineyard, and Eggertown is a town south of Oak Bluffs. It's more known for the whaling industry. There's a lot of very large houses and churches in Eggertown. This is an example of some of the churches that are located in Eggertown. The one on the right-hand side is more of like a Greek revival almost building, and it's the old Whaling Church. It's a Methodist church. The Harbor View is another grand hotel like the Sea View in Oak Bluffs. And the more I think about it, I just start wondering if the whaling industry was really accurate and if it was true history, because part of me just wonders if that story is meant to actually cover up what was here on the island years ago. Gay Head sits above these cliffs up island on the western end, and the town actually changed its name from Gay Head recently to Aquinnah. Aquinnah is the indigenous name for high land. There is actually a Wampanoag tribe that lives out here. The lighthouse has kept its original brick. You can see the arch above the window. And I do wonder if the indigenous people, along with there's a Black community in Oak Bluffs, and that community was said to come to the island around the time of the Civil War for respite and healing. But I do wonder if these groups, maybe together or separately, were the ones who created this magnificent buildings here. A lot of the island is covered with farmlands along with beautiful oak trees. And you'll see along the farmland these large stone walls, which I just often wonder, there's miles and miles in New England. Where do these stone walls come from? We're really fascinated by large rock and boulders, and this one is called Split Rock. It's located in Chilmark. I didn't take this picture. This is one that I found online, but there are others. This is just one example of the many large rocks that are found along the shoreline of the vineyard. And I also came across a story that in Chilmark there was this brickyard back in the 1800s that created many bricks. Very reminiscent to me of Tartarian architecture with the large tower and the brick building. The building to me looks completely abandoned, so I'm not really sure what the story actually is. And then this is the ruins of the supposed brickyard in the early 1930s. The island definitely has a sense of stepping back into time, into another era. And I think that's part of the attraction of what draws so many people to this place. And I'd be curious to hear what you think in the comments section. I really appreciate you watching. Thank you.